Yeah, it's showing that. Oops, now we're showing that.
No, we're showing
I'm seeing
that.
Zoom. Yeah, this is what Zoom's showing right here. So
But we're up here, we're not.
no, it's also showing the.
Yeah, let me stop sharing. Go back and do it again.
Try again.
This is how
One
that's
with
that.
PowerPoint. There we go.
Perfect, full screen. All right.
And before I wander off, can you want to speak and make sure they can hear you
Sure.
online too?
Can everybody hear me online? In here, of course, online.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, somebody said they can hear me.
Okay, good to hear.
Awesome.
I'm going to leave this up so if they say have any questions, you can
Okay,
see it too.
perfect. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you everybody for joining today, and thank you for inviting me today. Thank you for joining virtually as well. My name is Theresa Lanowitz, and I'm head of cybersecurity evangelism with AT&T Business. So at AT&T, what my team does, I get the honor of working with the illustrious Kate Brew every single day, which is pretty fun. But one of the things my team is responsible for, in addition to all the other thought leadership assets you see coming from AT&T Cybersecurity, is we create the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report. This is our annual thought leadership report, and you can abbreviate it CSI, Cybersecurity Insights Report. So it's a great way to remember it, CSI. So today I'll share some of the findings with you, and everybody here in person has a hard copy of the report. I'll also make sure that Kyle gets a PDF of the report as well as the slides. So if you're interested in that, you'll have that available to you. Okay, so this is our 12th annual report. We've been doing this since 2015. And this report was actually a competitive response to the Verizon data breach investigation report. So this is the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report. And you see that we have all of our previous covers up here. And one of the things we've been doing for the past 3 years is we've really been focusing on this idea of edge. What is edge computing? How is edge computing going to impact you? What do you need to do to protect your assets that you're connecting to these new types of networks? What do you need to do to protect your applications, your data, your endpoints, and so on? So what I'll talk about today is what the edge computing ecosystem really looks like, some of the key findings of the report, and then look at some of the key takeaways. So just a little bit about the methodology and how we conducted this research. So this is really primary research. It is vendor neutral, forward-looking, and actionable. The only place you'll see AT&T's name is on the cover. So this is vendor neutral research, as I said, forward-looking. And what we did this year is we went out, we surveyed 7 different industry verticals around the world: healthcare, retail, finance, manufacturing, energy and utilities, transportation, and US public sector, state, local, and higher education and public sector. And we've surveyed those people around the world. So around the world means, of course, North America, but in Europe, we also surveyed in Europe, England, Ireland, France, and Germany, APAC, Australia, Singapore, South Korea, and India, and Latin America as well. We surveyed 1,418 people from around the world, and they were all director level and above, and working in IT operations, IT networking, IT security, application development, as well as line of business. And we believe that it's really critical to survey and get input from those line of business participants, because the line of business is now leading what we're doing with technology. So the line of business participants are really important in this. So what do we mean by edge? You've heard me say edge a couple of times. You've heard Kyle talk about, the subtitle of the report is Edge Ecosystem. What do we mean by edge? And as we were doing this research, we found out that the definition of edge is something that's in flux. If you ask 10 different people what the definition of edge is, you'll probably get 12 different answers. So for the purpose of this discussion and the purpose of this report, we said, let's identify some common characteristics that everybody would be thinking about when they think about edge. So the first is edge computing. It's software defined, whether that's on-prem or in the cloud. The second characteristic of edge computing is that the workloads, the applications, the hosting, it's closer to where the data is generated and consumed. And the third characteristic is that edge computing is a distributed model of management, intelligence, and networks. And everybody's sitting there nodding their heads going, okay, all right, I get it. But let's take a very practical example that we've all encountered of edge computing. You may not even think about it, but this just shows that edge computing is all around us. It's not something that is coming in the future. It's something that's here now. So think about going into a parking structure. You have one of those digital scoreboards that says, here you are on the first floor. There are 2 open spots available. And you think to yourself, do I really want to take my chances driving around to find one of those 2 open spots? Or I'll go to the next floor up. So you go to the next floor and suddenly you see, oh, there are 50 spots. So I have a much better chance of finding a spot on that second floor. So think about what this is. It's not an app. You didn't have to open your laptop or your phone or your tablet and say, I'm going to the parking structure on 3rd and Maple, and oh, can I find a spot there? It's near real time. So it's giving you that near real time interaction. That data is being generated and consumed right there. The data is being generated as soon as a car exits or leaves a parking spot, and it's being presented to you on that digital scoreboard. So that's really a great example of edge computing at work in our daily lives that we've all encountered. So where we are right now as an industry is we're poised on the precipice of a new generation of computing that's underpinned by new types of networks, lower latency, higher bandwidth. We also have new types of applications, or applets, if you will. We're moving away from these GUI types of apps or applets or applications that are really machine-to-machine communication. And this is the idea of moving to this digital-first world. And we're not tethered to a keyboard. So in that parking structure example, we're not opening up an app, we're not opening up an application, it's machine-to-machine communication. So this is where the future is headed, and the complexity is getting far greater. And so what we found out when we surveyed our 1,418 survey participants from around the world, 57% of them said with an edge computing use cases, using those 3 characteristics we just talked about, 57% of them said that they are either in proof of concept, partial implementation, or full implementation with an edge computing use case. So that means that edge computing is not nascent. It's not something that people are thinking about. It's not in the ideation phase. It is real, it's in the implementation phase. What we also found out is that the endpoints are increasingly becoming more diverse. So right now, 48% of our survey participants said the edge computing endpoints that we're using are those very common things: laptop, desktop, phone, tablet. But what 30% told us is that as we move out to the future, in the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to see different types of endpoints. So think autonomous robotic machines for a factory floor. Think about autonomous cars, autonomous drones, autonomous rockets. Think about wearables for remote patient monitoring after surgery. So these are the types of endpoints that we're going to see increasingly come onto our networks. These are the types of endpoints that are providing us with that digital first experience. So the endpoints are changing. The endpoints are there, they're plentiful, but they're becoming far more diverse. What people also told us is that when they're looking at edge computing, securing edge computing is not a linear task. It's not as though we have to make sure the app is secure, we have to make sure the network is secure, and everything's done. It is often a circuitous route. Things are constantly changing. There may be new types of endpoints that somebody may bring into an edge computing example. There may be new network types. There may be additional vendors that they're using. So the edge is constantly changing. And what this really means is that we can't live in silos. And we found that out too. We found that people were saying, you know what, we want to work together. And I have some stats on that later on. So let's take a look at the top 3 key findings from this report. We're going to look at proactive investing, where security ranks. We'll look at cross-functional collaboration and communication, because we know that securing the edge is very circuitous and not a linear path. And then we're going to look at the idea of dynamic cyber resilience, saying you want to future-proof. So first thing, balanced investing. If you think 3 years ago at the onset of the pandemic, security moved from being a technical issue to being a business requirement. So this idea of balanced investing is really now coming full circle. Cross-functional collaboration, our respondents told us they can't do this alone. And then dynamic cyber resilience, meaning that you really want to make sure that you are future-proofing. So our respondents said, you know what? Security can't live in isolation any longer. And for that matter, every other part of what we're doing in this life cycle of edge computing can't live in isolation. You can't have the networking team here with a silo, the ops team here with a silo, the development team here with a silo. We have to break those silos down, and we have to really work together. And so this presents the perfect opportunity. We're moving to a new era of computing. Let's get rid of those things that we've been hanging on to since the 1960s, and let's go to this new era of computing. And we wanted to know from our survey participants, what types of edge computing use cases are you actually putting into production? And so for each of the 7 verticals that we surveyed, we have the top use case, and these use cases are all in the report as well. And what I wanted to show on this slide is the difference between 2022 and 2023. So what we're seeing is that between 2022, our primary use cases, and 2023, in every vertical that we surveyed, they're different. So it's not as though someone's saying, yeah, we found out that this use case is really good, we're going to stick with it. We're evolving. We're seeing more and different and unique types of use cases coming online. And what we also found is that people didn't hold back on investing in edge computing. So the top 2 use cases in 2022 were from manufacturing for video-based quality inspection and from retail for loss prevention. The top use cases in 2023 were from US SLED, state, local, and higher education, smart building management, and manufacturing on smart warehousing. So these are some pretty interesting use cases, and I'll talk about a couple of them. And we go into far more detail inside the report in these spreads. So for each vertical market, we have information on what the top use case is, what the top data rate is, what the top threat is, and so on. So we have all these outlined inside of the report. But let's look at video-based quality inspection from 2022. This was a really popular and powerful use case, and what the business gets from this. So if you think about video-based quality inspection on an assembly line, you're manufacturing something. Let's say you're manufacturing cars. So you have a video-based quality inspection on your assembly line, and let's say you have some variance set for your windshields when you're manufacturing your cars. If all of a sudden that variance goes awry, you can stop the production line at the point where the defect was inserted and remediate the defect right away. So from a business perspective, what this says is you have fewer recalls once the products actually go to market. So you're saving tremendously on the risk that there was some defect inserted on the assembly line. So this is a really great example that the business gets a lot of benefit from. This year, we take a look at what manufacturing is doing with smart warehousing. And what they're doing this year is they're bringing in new and diverse types of endpoints. They're creating robots with a specific software stack inside of them to be able to manage their factory floors. Smart building management was our top use case this year. The idea of being able to do preventive maintenance in advance of when something breaks. The idea of being able to monitor what's going on inside the building based upon how many people are inside the building, what the temperature is outside. So these are all pretty exciting use cases that are out there. And the really important thing is they're driving business outcomes. And that's really what we're finding that edge computing is about, is delivering these positive and beneficial business outcomes. So now in terms of how much people are allocating to security for their edge computing, we asked our survey respondents, of your edge computing budget, how much are you allocating to strategy and planning, network, applications, and security? And the results were very, very surprising, because when we were doing this research, we were kind of saying to each other, what are you expecting the numbers to come back as? And none of us expected this equal distribution. So this is really, really encouraging, especially in the security side and on the application side. So what we're seeing is that strategy and planning of their overall budget, they're spending 23% on planning. Highly unusual, because people just kind of, in the past, would just kind of say, yeah, we think that's pretty good, but they're not going to do a whole lot of investment up front. Network, 30% of their overall budget. Application, 22% of their overall budget. I read that and I was very encouraged by that number, because hopefully that means that there is application security along with that. And one of the things that our survey participants told us in our field survey, as well as with the qualitative surveys that we did with industry experts, is they said, we know we have to do better at application security. We know we have to do better at building security in from the beginning, from the application side, especially since applications are changing and they're no longer these GUI-based applications, since they are these headless types of applications, and since they are really living inside of this entire ecosystem. And then 22% on security. So in 2022, we found out that people were spending somewhere between 10 and 20% on security. But this year, it is very definitive, 22% of their overall budget for edge computing on security. So this is really great. It's showing that there's an ecosystem that's being built. It's showing that it's a thoughtful ecosystem, that they understand that everything is changing. The network is changing, lower latency, higher bandwidth networks. The applications are changing, these non-GUI applications, these applets, that there has to be planning and security has to be taken care of right from the beginning. You can't wait and architect security in later on. So this idea of parity in investing is showing that security, along with applications, is an integral part of the overall edge computing environment. Cross-functional collaboration is our second key finding. What our survey participants told us is they know this is bigger than what they have undertaken before in previous generations of computing. It's bigger than what they did in the mainframe days, bigger than what they did in the client server days, bigger than what they did in web, bigger than what they did in mobile, bigger than what they did in cloud, because there's an entire ecosystem. And they said, we can't continue to live in silos. We have to work cross-functionally. And oh, by the way, we also want to bring in these third parties to help us. So what we found is that our survey participants said that prior to going into production, while they are in that planning and ideation phase, 64% of them will bring in a trusted third party to help them. So somebody such as a consultancy, a global systems integrator, a telco, some type of managed security service provider. 64% of them will bring in some outside help in that planning phase. 71% said that once they hit production, once those edge computing applications are in production, 71% said they are going to bring in that trusted third party. So think about this in your own organizations. Are you down that path of moving to edge computing? Are you working cross-functionally with others inside of your organization, as well as those trusted third-party advisors? So this idea of a trusted third party is really critical. What they also told us is because they are using trusted third parties, they have far more confidence in their overall security. And the question we asked, we said, based on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, how confident are you, or how likely do you think it is that you're going to have some type of cybersecurity event, some type of attack, some type of a breach? And we also said, do you tie that to your business? And last year, the numbers for 2022 are up here. We can see that most organizations, and this is separated out by geography, we can see that most geographies are kind of in that high 4, low 4, high 3 range in terms of saying, yes, we think there's going to be an attack. We think it's fairly likely. And we also think it's a big, big impact on our business. So from 2022, the optimism there is that organizations are tying a security incident to the business outcome, to the impact to the business. So that was a really positive takeaway. Now we see in 2023, we asked the same question and we said, do you think there is a risk of some cyber event on a scale of 1 to 5? Everything is lower. It's about 26% lower. And then we said, do you see that event being tied to an impact to your business? And they said, yes, absolutely. So across the board, people are saying, we have more confidence in what we're doing. So all of the work that we've done over the past couple of years with teaching people about basic cybersecurity hygiene, with putting cybersecurity controls into place, with a lot of just the education, the outreach, all the work that you do, that's actually showing progress and it's showing improvement because people are far more confident. They also see that impact to the business as well as the line of business sees that impact as well. So 5 years ago or so, the line of business may be reluctant to spend budget on security. But because security leaders are able to talk in business terms and say, yeah, if we have an event, this is going to prevent us from doing this with our business, we're seeing that there's far more confidence, there's far more awareness from the line of business. And are we perfect? Not perfect, but we're getting better. So that's a really powerful movement in terms of where organizations are with respect to their confidence in their overall security. So the edge ecosystem, it's constantly evolving. As I mentioned earlier, securing it is not linear. It's very circuitous. And what people told us is that they are building into their architecture. They're building as a pillar of design. They are building future proofing. Once they go out and they figure what they want to be able to do from a business perspective with edge computing, they're saying, we want to future proof this. We want to make sure that we're designing for the future so that we can bring in new IoT types of devices, so that we can add new types of cybersecurity controls that maybe they didn't bring in the first place. So this idea of building for the future has really taken off with respect to edge computing. What they also told us is that the use cases are heavily slanted to IoT, industrial IoT, and operational technology. So we've been hearing for so many years about that convergence of IT and OT. We're starting to see this happen. What we also found out is that most of the use cases are taking place in more of the industrial verticals that we surveyed. So manufacturing, transportation, energy, and utilities. So those industries are really looking at what edge computing can do for them in terms of delivering those strong business outcomes. What we also ask people is, what is your opinion and what do you think the benefit is of deploying cybersecurity controls? So what this data really shows is that the security organization is really undergoing a big cultural shift. We know there's that cultural shift because the line of business and security are more tightly aligned. We know there's that shift because the security organization is now being brought in at the beginning of projects. But they said the top numbers would be worth deploying. Firewall at the network edge. Over to the right, this is the benefit. So 38.6, 39% of them said, yeah, it's worth deploying. Not worth deploying is the left-hand side on the negative side. 6.5% of them said it would not be worth deploying. But now if you take a look down at things such as patching, DDoS, things such as vulnerability management, those things that we know that are very, very important, this is indicating that people are really thinking at this moment when they took this survey, they're thinking about some of the sort of legacy cybersecurity controls that people are saying, I can only deploy a few. So now I have to really focus and figure out what I need in my organization. They're not really looking holistically. And you'll see why I say that in a couple of slides. So we saw that patching was something that organizations are saying, you know what? We don't think there's a whole lot of benefit in patching. So 18% are saying not worth deploying, 8% are saying worth deploying. Now, if you think about patching, I think in the old context, patching has been very manual, very labor intensive, very reactive. But if you think about going to this idea of an IoT controlled world, edge computing, patching suddenly becomes really important. So there are better patching solutions out there. There are better patching tools that are not reactive, that are very proactive, that don't require a lot of manual intervention, because as soon as you bring that manual intervention in, you suddenly run the risk of a defect somehow being inserted. So patching can be far more automated and should be far more automated when we get to this idea of edge computing. And what we also found out, and I wanted to pull these two out right here because I'll show you the table in detail. We asked them about their perception of attacks. And across the board, they said, you know what? DDoS is probably the biggest attack that we need to be concerned about. So this is a heat map. It's on page 30 of the report. And you can take this back to your organization and have discussions about this for days. You can agree with me, you can disagree with me, but you can take this back and you can have discussions for days. So the way we read this is it's a heat map. The darker the blue, the more concerned they are. And this was on a scale of 1 to 5. Which attack, from your perception, and perception is the key word, which attack do you perceive to be the biggest risk to you? So on the y-axis, we have the different types of attacks: DDoS, business email compromise, personal information exfiltration, phishing, insider threat, account takeover, nation state cyber attacks, and ransomware attacks. So that's on the y-axis, the different types of attacks. Across on the x-axis, across the top, we have the total, that's the gray bar, that's the aggregate. And then we have finance, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, energy, transportation, and US state, local education, and state and local government and higher education. So in the aggregate, DDoS comes in at number 1. So on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your perception, the biggest attack you need to be concerned about for edge computing? DDoS came in number 1 spot, 3.03 out of 5. Ransomware came in 8 out of 8, 2.80. And you should certainly still be very aware of ransomware. But what this is showing is a shift in the thinking around security. And so we took a look at this and we said, this is really, really fascinating, because people were saying DDoS isn't really something that I would be interested in deploying. It's kind of an insurance policy, runs in the background. And now people are saying, they're telling us that their biggest perceived attack is DDoS. So let's take a look at this. If we take a look at finance, for example, you see the dark blue boxes, 3.41, 3.34. Their top concern is business email compromise from a finance vertical. Personal information exfiltration is their second biggest concern. Now let's jump over to manufacturing. We look at manufacturing. Manufacturing's biggest perceived concern is DDoS. So you look at that and you say, why is that happening? Why did ransomware drop all the way down here and DDoS pop to the top? So if we think about it, ransomware requires something very active. We have to download a link, click on a link, download a file. We have to do something that's very active. But if we're living in an edge world controlled by IoT devices, these DDoS attacks suddenly become far more accessible. It's you find some IoT type of device as a cyber adversary that you can attack and potentially be able to move laterally through the network through that DDoS attack. And then you can execute ransomware attacks. You can put some phishing attacks in there. You can do some account takeovers. So once you're in through that IoT type of device, you can do a lot of different things. So I'd encourage all of you, take a look at this inside of the report, page 30. Take a look at the table, go back to your own organizations, figure out which vertical you fit in here, or look at it in the aggregate and say, are we protecting ourselves against these types of attacks? So where are we putting our bets as to where we're going to be attacked? And so as I go out and talk about this, I get the same reaction all the time. People say, how can DDoS be number 1 and ransomware be number 8 out of 8? And that's not to say you should not worry about them, because you certainly should be worried about everything. And I have one colleague at AT&T who likes to say, look at this table, it's all blue. You can't ignore anything. It's all bad. But where are you placing your bets? So as you move to this idea of edge computing, what are you doing to protect those IoT types of devices? So this is a pretty interesting table. This, as I mentioned, is on page 30 of the report. The other table that's really interesting is on page 23 of the report. And the one that's on page 23 of the report calls out each attack type, says what it is, and the business damage that it can do. So these are two pretty interesting tables to go back to your own organization and figure out what your perception is, how you're looking at these types of things. And if anybody has any sort of interesting discussions with your colleagues once you get back to the office, I'm really, really curious to find out. Josh?
So I have an interesting observation. Maybe you guys have already seen this, but it seems like SLED and healthcare, they think nothing can happen to them. It's unlikely. Whereas finance is like everything can happen.
Yeah, that and that is interesting. That's another interesting observation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, healthcare is kind of like
Healthcare.
I mean, all that stuff is regulated, but I think it's interesting. For me, it's more about the money. It's about following the money trail, which is finance is highly finance.
Yeah.
Right? They have huge investments, and so they're like, we're going to invest in preventing all this stuff. Whereas SLED and healthcare is like, we ain't got no money, so why do we care? If it happens, it happens.
We're going to place our bets kind of like where we, yeah. We're going to kind of cut our losses. Do you have a comment? No.
I was on the second line. We could also back what the region is solved, like we did the thing.
Yeah.
None of these things are the same on a day.
But what people told us in our survey is they said, we have done a pretty good job. And some of them have said, we've done a pretty good job as an industry, or we've done a pretty good job inside of our organization of teaching people about what to be aware of. And some of them have spun up cybersecurity sort of user groups, or inside their own companies. I know I work with one large company where they have an incredible cyber awareness team. Everybody in the company is aware of cyber. From any job that you have inside of that company, you need to be cyber aware, you need to be cyber trained. So over the past couple of years, we've seen that happen more and more, where organizations are spinning up cyber awareness inside. So yeah, but very interesting. So I'd encourage you to take it back, see what you think inside of your own organizations. What we also found is that as the number of edge computing use cases increase, the number of cybersecurity controls, the endpoint security controls people want to use and people are willing to invest in suddenly start to increase. So if we look at this, and the way we read this are the endpoint security controls on the y-axis, and then the number of edge use cases that are either partially or fully implemented across on the x-axis. So as we go out to having 4 edge use cases fully or partially implemented, the number suddenly starts to go up, because these use cases, suddenly they're in production and people are saying, oh, we never thought about that. Or, oh, this is something brand new. And that's why I say this is a new era, a new generation of computing, where people are suddenly going to start to see things that maybe we haven't seen in the past. So there's a whole lot of work out there that's really, really interesting. And this idea of more edge use cases, more cybersecurity controls, more edge use cases, the more important cybersecurity becomes. So what did we learn from this? And I like to show this slide because this does a really good job of breaking down the verticals that we surveyed, where they are with at least one fully implemented use case, and what that primary use case is, what their top endpoint is, and what the top attack is that they're concerned about. So in terms of having at least one edge computing use case fully implemented, you see that SLED is leading the pack, 66%. So that's really interesting that government, state, local government, and higher education, they're out there leading the pack. But everybody, every vertical that we surveyed is really coming on strong. We see retail, 48%, finance, 47%. And then you look at the primary use case. So SLED, state, local, and higher education, is smart building management. Retail, real-time inventory management. And then manufacturing, smart warehousing. And then we see the top endpoint. So we see mobile devices. Mobile devices really kind of leading the pack there in terms of people are saying, yeah, mobile devices. But as you start to look out further, and this is, we're doing vertical reports as well, just working on the healthcare one. As we look out 3 years or so, healthcare is saying it's remote patient monitoring. So wearables, it's not necessarily these mobile devices, it's our wearables that we're really going to be more concerned about in the future. And then the top threat that people are concerned about. And as I mentioned, you can go through the report and look at the different spreads and see what everybody is concerned about from a vertical perspective. And then how do you prepare to secure that edge ecosystem? As I mentioned, people were saying, you know what, we are building a pillar of design to make sure we are future-proofing what we're doing from the edge perspective. But you really want to make sure that you have that cross-functional group to collaborate and define what your business goal is, because this is all about generating positive business outcomes. So you want to define what that business goal is, figure out how to proactively invest, especially in things such as security and applications. And then really make sure that you're collaborating not only internally, but externally with those experts as well, those consulting organizations, managed security services, global systems integrators, telco, other network providers. So make sure you're collaborating with someone who has done this before. And then really make sure that you are future-proofing what you're doing, because things are going to change. And we see that all the time. We saw that between 2022 and 2023 in terms of the use cases that people were using. So they're telling us that things are changing. So that's just a little bit about the report. You have a copy of the report, 60 pages. So anybody ever needs any late night reading, I'd highly recommend this. And you know, we have a wealth of resources. You can visit us at cybersecurity.att.com. As I mentioned, we'll have vertical reports, and the vertical reports again are vendor neutral. So they're a double click on this. So we'll have healthcare, manufacturing, transportation, and US SLED in terms of vertical reports that will all be out in the next several months. So the healthcare one will be launching on July 12th. So if you're in healthcare business, take a look at that. We also have infographics there. We have links to webcasts and so on. So this is the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report, or CSI, for 2023. Thank you so much.
So do we have any questions in the room? Figure Claire would have a question. I'm gonna run back here. Good.
Thank you, Theresa. That was very interesting. So seeing DDoS so high, I normally would have thought, well, is that really the case? But I happen to listen to a podcast quite often. How many of you listen to Risky Business? It's a great cybersecurity podcast. Well, recently, and they can't cover all of the cybersecurity attacks, but they just recently highlighted Microsoft, and then later I read it was also UPS, and they were attacked, perhaps, I'm not sure if it's 100% true, by anonymous Sudan, and it was a DDoS attack. So now my spidey sense, I have a red flag raised. I'm gonna keep my eyes open about DDoS. And I just wanna thank you for making us aware that when we look at the headlines, that's one thing, but how people are preparing. They might be collecting information for what's happening to them internally. They're not sharing it. It's not always front page news, but this might be a good reflection for all of us as we plan.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and thank you for bringing that up. That raises a really important point. When we got this data back, we took a look at this, and again, we were all surprised by DDoS being a top attack. We went back and looked at the 2021 report. So in our 2021 report, same methodology, same number of survey respondents roughly. What we found in our 2021 report is there was a little mention. There was one sentence inside the report that said, across the board, every industry vertical that we surveyed said, DDoS is something we're going to be very concerned about in the next couple of years. So that was in 2021. And we found that sentence and said, wow, we were pretty prescient there, because in 2021, and when we saw it in 2021, we said, this is an anomaly. But in 2021, people were telling us, be aware of DDoS. And now, we're seeing DDoS come out the number one attack concern here. And this is perception. So this is the 1,418 global survey participants. This is their perception of what they believe.
Okay, hold on. We got another question here in the room.
Yeah, I might have missed this, but on the graph about respondents saying a solution is not worth deploying versus is it significant?
Yep.
Is there a was it also was the data also, does it also include a respondent saying yes, they are aware that it provides a significant cost benefit, but we are not deploying it? Do they take that into account?
So
These reports?
yeah, and this, I think what you're asking is, are they saying if we had the money, we would do it?
Yes.
And so
like that,
the way the question was really phrased, though, do you believe that this would provide a significant cost benefit? So we didn't say, are you doing this today?
Right.
So they should interpret the question as saying, if budget was no object, is this something you would believe would be worthwhile to deploy?
Right.
Or it would not be worthwhile to deploy?
Okay.
Because some of them may want to do it,
Yeah.
and may not have the budget, but they're still saying, yeah, it would be really important to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other side of the room. If anybody's online with questions, wants to come up mute and ask a question, you can do that also.
I just wanted to check if you have some data around the business email compromise risk that people see. Do you also have some data like which are those vendors which people are more concerned about?
No, we don't have that. We did not break anything out by vendors. This is all vendor neutral. We didn't say, are you using vendor A or vendor B? It's just as a control, as an attack type. So we didn't ask anything about vendors.
Thanks. Anybody online have any questions? Okay, got another question here in the room, so hold on.
Okay, thank you. Following up on figure 10 from 2 questions ago, it seems that the concerns were largely kind of infrastructure based. Or was the question posed regarding hardening their applications or secure applications that are actually going to these edge devices?
We did not ask a question that was specific to that.
Yeah,
We asked this question just broadly. So,
sure.
yeah.
Because, I was just wondering, because it's definitely more prevalent to have custom code running on these edge devices.
Yeah.
AI models, data acquisition stuff. So, okay.
And that is a really great point, because I am a huge fan of application security. So application security is one of those things. And I think GlassCon is such a great conference because it's all application security for 2 days. So application security, it's kind of that last mile, if you will. And suddenly you start to hear developers and you start to see messaging coming from development companies talking about DevSecOps or SecDevOps. And so I've been saying probably for the past 20 years that this is the year of application security. And I am hopeful that 2023 is the year of application security. So we're starting to see that because, like you said, you have all that custom code running on these edge types of devices. So you can't ignore it.
I agree. And it seems like the majority of the concerns remind me of what we were doing in the data center 15 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yep.
Firewalls, network, everything else. And it's like, we're going to have all the same mistakes with these proliferation of connected edge
Exactly,
devices.
exactly. And that's why I say we're seeing this cultural shift, this cultural change, because you look at this table with perceived cost benefit, but then you go down to this table where suddenly they start to deploy more edge use cases and they say, oh, we need to do something different. So you can't just do the same thing over and over. And as we see, 22% of the total budget is being invested in applications. So that was a really positive side to me.
Oh, hold on.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you for the presentation. That's very good. And so if we think about what's people's most concerns, the DDoS is on the top. Remember you talked about it. And then if we look at the page 34, that it's worth or not worth deploying.
Yep.
And the DDoS mitigation is at the bottom. And the most people don't think it's worth deploy.
Right.
How do we?
And again, this is that cultural shift, because this is what he was just talking about, that we're not seeing a whole lot on the application side. So it's that cultural shift of saying, you know what, we're not necessarily thinking about it now. And DDoS has been one of those things that's been similar to an insurance policy just running in the background. When we need it, it's there. But we're not thinking about it for the future. And this is kind of legacy. This, I think, represents some legacy thinking. But then once you get to this table 3 on page 30, you suddenly start to see they're not too keen on investing in DDoS, but yet they're saying they're concerned about DDoS. So I looked at that and I'm like, well, what is going on? Because you look at that and they say, we're not too concerned about investing in it. Well, that's the old way of thinking. Now, suddenly you start to have these edge use cases in production and you're concerned about DDoS because you suddenly start to see, as you have more edge use cases ready to deploy, either fully deployed or partially deployed, you're going to bring on more and different types of cybersecurity controls. So I think what we're seeing here is a progression of thought process where they say, legacy, we're not so sure about it. But then as we start to move to edge use cases, we say, yeah, we're really concerned about DDoS. And then as we start to bring on more edge use cases, we're concerned about our controls.
So I have a thought on this too, and this may help with Karen's thing. This table right here is about likelihood. So how likely is it that this event would occur? And I mean, DDoS is pretty easy to do, right? You get a botnet, you send out a whole bunch of traffic, it happens.
Yep.
The thing that this is lacking is the impact side of that. And that might be the explanation for what Karen's observation was, which is they don't care because it's not that impactful, right? In certain circumstances, obviously DDoS can take down, if it's big enough, it can take down whole organizations.
Right.
But it seems like you need that question in here to get the full
Yeah,
picture.
and we did ask about, you know, are you aware of what these things are? And we provided them with this table that's on page 23 saying, here's what a DDoS attack is, here's the business impact to it, because that's a really good point. But we provided them with this information in the survey saying, here's what these different types of attacks can do to your business. So, you know, they were, from an awareness perspective, you know, even if they weren't so sure maybe what a DDoS attack is, they're seeing it there. So, yes, yeah.
SLED organization impact is probably minimal versus finance where you're getting real time.
Exactly. Or manufacturing, or yeah. And the data, you know, sitting and reading this and looking at the data, it's really interesting to just kind of say, you know, how are people thinking? But I think from a broad perspective, you can see that there is a shift in thinking around security. And keep in mind that these were not necessarily security professionals that we interviewed. They were development professionals, business professionals, infrastructure, IT network, operations. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. But security is definitely maturing.
We have a question online.
Yeah, I thought I had, yeah, I thought I had a slide on there.
Does anybody have any questions online? We are wrapping up here, so.
Yeah, one of the things I want to point out, and this is what Kate brought up, this is the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report, but every year we work, and it's a global field survey, but it's also a survey of subject matter experts across the industry. And this year we had experts from Akamai, Cisco, Avante, Fortinet, SentinelOne, Checkpoint, Palo Alto Networks, and VMware, providing us with sort of more of the qualitative analysis that we're looking at. So they're on page 43. And also this morning in the Washington Post, there was a quote from Steve Winterfeld from Akamai, who talked about the data from the AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report. So, you know, we're seeing these other vendors are quoting this report as well. So Steve talked about exactly what we've been talking about, this idea of DDoS being the #1 attack, but people saying, yeah, we're not really interested in investing in it. So he talked about that this morning in the Washington Post.
All right. Thank you very much, Teresa. It's been great. Great questions. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So thank you all for attending the Austin meeting for June, and I will see you next month and maybe at the happy hour. We'll send something out about that. Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.